We all think we know the story of Steve Jobs, the black turtleneck, the iconic product launches, but behind all that is this incredible story of epic failure, unbelievable resilience, and a comeback that didn't just save a company, it literally changed the world. And it all kicked off with one simple idea. See, this quote, which Jobs loved to use, was basically his entire playbook. It wasn't about looking at what people wanted right now. No, it was about figuring out what they were going to want next and building that. That one idea drove every single thing he did. So where does a mindset like that even come from? Well, to really get the innovator, you've got to first understand the rebel. And let's just say his early life was anything but ordinary. And the change happened so fast, it's kind of hard to believe. On the left, you've got this long-haired high school kid, totally into the whole counterculture vibe of the early 70s. But then, just 4 years later, that's him on the right, starting a company with Steve Wozniak, about to kick off a revolution. And that revolution, it started right here. Not in some fancy corporate tower, but in his parents' garage. I know, it sounds like a myth, but for Jobs and Wozniak, this was it. This is where they literally built the very first Apple computers, with their own hands. Right from the get-go, Jobs just wasn't playing by the rules. He drops out of a super expensive college after one semester because he felt like it was just a waste of his parents' hard-earned money. But he didn't stop learning. He just snuck into classes that he was actually curious about, including one on calligraphy. Yeah, calligraphy. Seemed totally random at the time, but trust me, it's going to come back in a huge way later on. And that right there, that's the key to his genius. See, most people see technology and art as two completely different things. Not Jobs. He saw them as two sides of the same coin. His whole goal was to blend the beauty and creativity of the humanities with the raw power of technology. That idea, it basically became the soul of Apple. And that vision worked. I mean, it worked big time. It took Apple from that garage to a global powerhouse at lightning speed. But that crazy fast rise was about to be followed by a truly shocking fall. The Apple II, man, that was the rocket ship. The technical wizard behind it was mostly the brilliant Steve Wozniak, and this thing was one of the very first computers to actually sell to regular people. It took the computer out of the lab and put it in homes and schools. And just like that, Apple became a household name. So how do you convince a top executive from Pepsi to come run your little computer company? Well, if you're Steve Jobs, you hit him with this legendary line. It just perfectly shows his insane powers of persuasion and this almost religious belief he had in Apple's mission. The crazy irony, though, is that the very man he brought in to build his kingdom would be the one to kick him out of it. And then the unthinkable happened. At just 30 years old, Steve Jobs, the guy who started it all, the visionary, gets fired publicly from his own company. It was a total humiliation. For almost anyone else, that would have been the end of the story. But for Steve Jobs, this was, believe it or not, a new beginning. His time away from Apple, what people call his wilderness years, was really defined by two totally different projects. One, a massive failure, and the other, a world-changing success. So this period away from Apple was really a tale of two companies. On one side, you had Next. The computers were amazing, technically brilliant, but way too expensive, a commercial flop. But on the other side, he bought a tiny little graphics company for $10 million. That company? Pixar. And yeah, it would go on to change animated movies forever. He learned a ton from both experiences. And Pixar's success wasn't just big, it was staggering. In 2006, Disney came knocking and bought the studio for $7.4 billion. That deal made Steve Jobs, the college dropout who got fired from his own company, the single largest shareholder in Disney. You just can't make this stuff up. So now he's got this massive win under his belt, and it's the perfect setup for what might be the greatest second act in the history of business. His epic return to Apple, a company that was, by then, pretty much on its deathbed. When Jobs walked back in the door at Apple, the place was a complete disaster. It was losing money hand over fist. The product line was a confusing mess, and honestly, most people thought it was just months away from going out of business for good. The job wasn't just to turn it around, he had to pull off a miracle. And this was the first sign of that miracle, the iMac. It looked like nothing else on the market. It was colorful, it was fun, it was simple, it was a giant, bold statement to the world that Apple was back, and from now on, they were going to think different. What came next was maybe the single greatest hot streak in the history of technology. First, the iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket. It changed music. Then, the iTunes Store, which changed how we buy music. Then, in 2007, the iPhone, which wasn't just a phone, it changed, well, everything. And to top it all off, the iPad, which created a whole new category of device we didn't even know we wanted. So when you look back, his legacy isn't just about a bunch of cool gadgets. It's about how he fundamentally rewired entire industries one after another. I mean, just think about the sheer scope of this. It's one thing for a visionary to disrupt one industry. Jobs did it 4 different times. He made computers friendly and personal with the Mac's simple point-and-click interface. He basically kicked off the whole era of digital animated movies with Pixar. He completely upended the music business with the iPod and iTunes, and he totally redefined what a phone could be with the iPhone. It's just incredible. And this number? Over 450 patents with his name on them. This tells you something really crucial. He wasn't just some big ideas guy floating above it all. No. He was obsessed with the details, with the design, with the look and feel of every single button and curve. On October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away. According to his sister, who was with him, these were his final words. A sense of awe and wonder right up to the very end. Here was a man who truly stood at that intersection of art and technology, and somehow managed to bend the future to his will.
So in the end, his story really makes you ask this question. It shows us that the road to changing the world, well, it's not a straight line. It's full of failure and exile and rejection. But it's also about having this relentless, almost crazy belief that you really can put a dent in the universe.